Recording. So we're live.
All right, live.
So hey, welcome, Joe. Hey,
Mike.
how you doing?
Great to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So the new podcast, right? So welcome out there. And we're starting today testing out our new podcast. So what name did we choose? What was the winner?
We kicked around a bunch of them, but I think we settled on CXO Underground.
That sounds good. Where does that come from?
I've heard just brainstorming with a bunch of other folks a while back on what names you give podcasts or vlogs, and this was a name that just popped into my head one day, and I went out and reserved it on Network Solutions, and I just was sitting there waiting for this day.
Well, that's good. That's good. So hey, for folks who are new to our podcast, first and foremost, my name is Mike Charobee. We're here in Charlotte, North Carolina. My background is been in technology for close to 2 decades. I've been more on the sales and marketing side of things. As an entrepreneur, have a couple of different businesses. Some that you may be familiar with locally in the Charlotte area would be Ballantine IT Professionals. It's a great nonprofit group for IT professionals in the area. It's dovetailed into some other groups. So we have a legacy sister group called the Lake Norman IT Professionals. So it helps the IT world get connected here in Charlotte. From a professional perspective, I have my own technology consulting and brokerage firm. And what we do is we help IT folks and businesses select IT projects much quicker and much faster. We're kind of like your general contractor for IT. So we help with a lot of different projects here in North Carolina, but also we've got clients who are in the United States and abroad. So those are kind of our day-to-day things. And Joe, do you mind talking a little more about yourself?
Sure. I'm a long-time IT professional. Been in IT. This is my 42nd year. I've been a CIO for just about 21 years now. And what's fun for me, Mike, is Mike and I have been able to work together both outside of the professional environment in terms of the businesses that I've worked for, but also on ventures like this. So Mike is a great resource, and if you haven't had a chance to meet Mike and learn more about his services, I would encourage you to do that. So I've been in and around organizations of varying sizes, different industries. What's fun for me is I'm wrapping up my career at Snap AV. I'm retiring and going full time now, and doing the work of coaching and advising IT leaders all over the globe. I've had a business called CIO Mentor for about 20 years now, and I've been dabbling in it off and on. And now I'm sort of pouring the gas on it. There's my logo.
I'm showing it on. We're doing the video here too as well. So you can't see it if you're listening to the podcast, but Joe's got his branding going. So that's great.
It's a lot of fun, and I really get a kick out of helping IT leaders. My purpose is really trying to help them succeed and help their organization succeed. It's a fairly simple model, and I'm just excited about it. I'm really looking forward to this collaboration. Our hope is to bring in lots of fun guests, not only here in the Charlotte region, but from around the U.S. and around the globe. Both Mike and I have lots of great contacts, and we're hoping we can bring some relevant content to all of our listeners and watchers.
So, Joe, I know you've been on a lot of podcasts, and you're a keynote speaker. This podcast, have you done podcasts yourself before? Or?
I have. I started doing some stuff on YouTube several years back, and they were pretty canned. I've got about 10 on my CIO Mentor YouTube channel, and I really sort of lost momentum around that, and it's something I've always wanted to get back to. So when you and I were collaborating on this idea, I thought, well, let's just jump right in and see what happens. So,
hey, we're accountability partners, right? So 2020, the Roaring 20s, back again, we're holding each other accountable. So that's great. So with that, again, for new listeners that aren't familiar, this is our first podcast. So we're also trying to do this on YouTube as well. So depends on how you like to consume your knowledge and learn about new things. We'd love to hear more from you, whether it's on our podcast, which we'll have on Apple, and we'll also have on SoundCloud and some others. And then we'll also have this on our YouTube channel. So again, we're just testing some things out. So today you're going to see the behind the scenes. How do you kick off a podcast? So Joe, with that, we talked about, hey, how we're going to launch this podcast, the CXO Underground. is the name that we're going to go with. And really the theme behind it's going to be business, right?
Business.
Entrepreneurship and how do you do business?
Yeah.
But from a technology perspective, right?
Yeah, yeah. And how do we fit into organizations? I mean, that's been one of the challenges that I've tried to help leaders with throughout my whole career is how do you get that recognition inside companies as a business leader. And so we'll have topics along those lines.
Cool. So I think we talked about before. So folks who are kind of familiar with ESPN, they've got a long-standing show called PTI. So we kind of like the model in regards to kind of keeping it short and sweet. So again, we know IT. Sometimes you read some things in IT, and you're like, what did I just read? I got to go back and read that. I know that was really important. So we want to make this fresh, exciting. We're also thinking about guests. What's kind of the vision for guests for the show?
Well, you and I both have a lot of contacts, both here in the region and around the country and the globe. And I think, I'd love to be able to pull some of those resources in for relevant topics and have them be part of our program. And I think we'll be able to do that.
Excellent. Yeah. So, Joe has a wealth of lists out there, and Joe's also out there internationally. So I'm really excited about getting to learn and connect with some folks internationally to see what those trends are. Because hey, we're again like 20 years after really internet hit corporate America and hit business. It's here, right? Everybody uses it, and technology is here. So some of the other things we're talking about, Joe, specifically, let's talk about local, right? What's this thing called the next season? And you really introduced it to me. That's going to be one of our PTI, so to speak, topics today is the next season.
Right. I think, in the region in particular, and not only the region, but around the globe and of course across the U.S., there's a lot of transition happening with baby boomers, kind of like me, who are retiring and moving on, some voluntarily, some not voluntarily. And you get a lot of people sort of coming to me asking, hey, now what? They're not really quite prepared to figure out what that next season looks like. So that's one of the topics we can dig into.
Excellent. Yeah, that's definitely what we want to talk about. And hey, if it is your next season, whether it's expected or unexpected, it's a great economy. I've had folks and family members that are looking at retirement, and the economy changes. It can really put a lot of undue stress on you. So if you are in your next season, just be thankful the economy is going well, knock on wood, right, to keep those things going. Let's talk about national. What are you seeing nationally? We do a lot of things here in Charlotte. There's the people and the relationships that we have. But, coming from where you come from, right, you were in Minnesota in the Midwest, but also the access to all the different leaders that you're with. What are you seeing nationally?
Well, I'm seeing a common theme. I was talking to a colleague yesterday, happens to be based in India, and he does a lot of training. I'm the board chair of the Business Relationship Management Institute, which has some 30,000 members now worldwide. And one of the phenomenons that we were talking about is the idea that we've been fighting as IT professionals to kind of gain the credibility inside organizations. And I think we've made progress over the years, and you can certainly see it. There's still a long way to go. And I find that IT leaders are still struggling with a way to try to overcome that obstacle and be recognized inside the organizations as a business leader. And that's the sort of thing that I love helping people think about and work on. And CIOs, CIO Magazine just had an article they published, I bet it was a month ago, where their analysis, the research shows that the average tenure now is 4 years. It used to be about 6, so it's shrinking, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if that's a voluntary thing or involuntary thing, but it's a real phenomenon. And part of it is I think the C-suite's disappointed or frustrated in this economy with fast-paced changes and competitors coming out of nowhere. And they're really expecting the CIOs and those organizations to help lead the charge. So I think I'm seeing a lot of that, not only here in the U.S., but around the globe.
Now, we've also seen trends in regards to change of titles, right? So the CIO definitely being the first in the C-suite from a technology perspective, or CTO, right, collectively. But you're starting to also see, from my perspective, being in business development, entrepreneurship, you're starting to see people getting CDOs, which stands for Chief Digital Officer, and some other different types of titles. We're also seeing the CISO, which is your Chief Information Security Officer. Where do you see with these new titles? They do have a senior title to it.
Right.
Are they really in the C-suite? Are they not? Or what are you seeing?
I'm seeing a mixed bag. I was talking to a colleague about this a few months back, and one of the the theories that we were sort of postulating on was this idea that in some respects, the chief digital officer, chief data officer are, sort of reactions to, failed CIO engagements. I think this is, again, where C-suite is saying, I want more. And, maybe the idea would be, let's throw another C-suite title at the problem and see if that fixes it. So I think that's sort of a knee-jerk. I don't know what the future holds, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of those titles sort of fade away a little bit.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it gets back to, in organizations, and this is where I see the core problem, when the C-suite is laying out the strategy for the next year or the next 2 years or 3 years, it's typically around margin, EBITDA, market share, customer retention, those sorts of things, which is great. But those strategies really don't help inform what work IT should be working on, not only IT but other organizations within the company. And so I see that's a big challenge, and I'm helping some CIOs sort of figure out how do you back into the work that you should be doing.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of things around scaled agile or agile, or it's lots of other different methodologies trying to overcome the same problem.
Yeah.
And to me, the methodology is you can pick one. It doesn't matter as long as you execute well. It's really, what are you working on that's more important than the methodology. And once you figure that out, then of course execution's the name of the game. If you don't execute, you don't get credibility. But that's where I see a lot of activity, a lot of thinking going on around the C-suite and IT leaders around the globe.
That's great. Yeah. Internationally, kind of some of the things that I've seen, I've been in the space of help desk, right? And help desk as a service. So the whole methodology behind that was kind of your tier one help desk, which how I would define, and some of the markets will define a tier one help desk is password resets. Hey, is my printer on? Really kind of rudimentary IT support to help those organizations. And what happened over the years, right, during the economic downturn is a lot of those type of services were flushed overseas, right? Again, overseas folks, super talented, do really great, but it's just the cultural difference when you're on the phone with somebody in the U.S. and you're talking overseas. It's just the cultural differences can get frustrating for a lot of folks in the organization. So, again, technically, if they're able to do that technically behind a computer, I'm sure that it works well. But we're just seeing a ton of issues of pain around that. So one thing that we're also seeing is software as a service. There's a lot of different software as a service. How am I going to support that? I'm really going to crush my numbers as an entrepreneur, as a business, if I put a tier 2 or a tier 3 level person on that help desk issue when it's really a tier 1 issue. Mm-hmm. How do I do that? So those are some of the things we're seeing internationally, but I'm also seeing internationally in regards to business. There's a lot of opportunities. Using folks overseas. The right point is, it can be a fraction of the cost. And speaking, from a mic and the behind the glass from a small business owner, that's how me or some of my our peers that are in small businesses, that's how they're going to get off the ground and they turn into a larger organization, right? So again, I have high appreciation for internationally, but it's really like you talked about, is where does that fit digitally? Where does it work? It's not one size fits all. So definitely seeing that, but also internationally is, I think people are more accustomed to doing business over internationally because they've been doing it for so much time. And I think that technology is coming up. So as we kind of wrap up this next season segment, right, from our PTI model, what do folks do that are the baby boomers that either they got tapped on the shoulder unexpectedly, or hey, they know in 6 months or 12 months, what do I do? How do I jumpstart it all? You're right there, right?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I locally here, I collaborated with a few CIOs. I won't name their names here because I didn't ask them if I could ahead of time. But we actually went through a program earlier I guess it was last year now, called My Next Season. There's a book by that name. Pick it up on Amazon for $15. Basically, what they're trying to do is help you think about the things that are important to you. Is it family? Is it business? Is it both? How do you balance that? Do you like relaxation? Do you want time off? Sort of getting you grounded in, what things are absolutely important. And so many CIOs that I talk to, and here in the region, there's a number of CIOs that are in transition right now, more than I've seen in a long time, Mike. And, the question you get is, how do I I haven't spent any time on my brand. I'm not, my LinkedIn profile is out of date. How do I start? How do I network? I mean, how can I jumpstart all of that? That's the thing that I hear most frequently. And, I've always given people advice, and I'm sure you do the same, is, that's not something you can flip on overnight. That's something you continually have to do. I spend a lot of time in the local markets that I live in, and I make sure that I'm heading to conferences. I participate in Valentine IT. Lake Norman, I did an event for those guys last week. And I think those are, that's something I just committed myself to. And that's something I would encourage all of our watchers, listeners to do, is to make sure that you're actually active in the market, get your name out there, be known for something. That's the best way that I think that you really can sort of establish, the foundation for what's next for you.
Yeah. No, it's true, right? Starting a business, it's hard, but also with the technologies that are out there today, from a small business owner perspective, if you're going to be a solo entrepreneur in the gig economy, right? You certainly have so many tools now to get started, right? You have a laptop and access to the internet. You can really be dangerous, but at the end of the day, you really have to have, it's kind of 101 of marketing and sales is what does your buyer want, right? So as we kind of, I guess, go into our next topic is, social, right? I mean, social definitely is a huge impact in regards to social media. Recently within Facebook, right, with the election coming up, and what are some of the social platforms going to do? It sounds like Facebook has kind of said, hey, we don't care. We're going to let whoever run. To me, working for Fortune 500 companies, that sounds like a Wall Street play, right? Yeah. I mean, Wall Street's saying, hey, you've got to have these revenues, and you know what? You become the master of puppets, right, in regards to doing that. So what are you seeing out there as a CIO? What's this whole Facebook reality, and what's
I think there's it kind of falls into that. And by the way, I agree with you. I think their motivations are financially driven, and I think you're starting to see Congress sort of take notice. Stephen King the other day decided he's out.
Wow.
He decided he's out of Facebook because he didn't appreciate the so-called fake news that is showing up there. And you contrast that to Google, Apple, Microsoft to some extent, and they're all trying to find ways to block that content. Facebook says they don't really want to play a role there. So I think that'll play out. I think the markets are brutally efficient, and they will figure out if that's a good idea or not, and people will decide on their own. But I think related to that, Mike, is a phenomenon that I've been seeing, and I talked about this up at Lake Norman. There's a movement around conscious capitalism, where companies are now beginning to focus on more than just the bottom line. And millennials and the generation before millennials, which I can never remember what they're called, but they're all hungry to work for companies that have a purpose that goes beyond revenue and profits. They want companies that do good in their communities, that do good for the planet. Really interesting.
Is that real news or is that fake news?
That's real news. Actually, I did a whole bunch of research.
Gen X, Gen Y, and then millennials.
And so you're starting to see at the Business Roundtable, which is a group of North American business CEOs, about 200 of them, this past August at their Business Roundtable, put together a purpose of business, which they put, shareholder as the fifth item. The rest was employees, treating suppliers and partners fairly, doing well in the communities. These are things at the top of the list, not the bottom. And Jamie Dimon, who's the chair of that organization, is also the chair of and the president of JP Morgan Chase. And they were all sort of, you hear Mark Benioff from Salesforce saying it, Patagonia, their mission statement is, we're in business to save the planet, which is a pretty bold statement. But that's the kind of thing you're seeing. And research is starting to show up that employees who work for companies that have a purpose that goes beyond profit actually do better than their peer group competitors. Some say 10 times better. So I think there's a realization by the C-suite that they've got to start to think about that. And obviously there's a people, purpose, planet, and profit sort of quadruple bottom line concept behind it.
Yeah.
But they're after the bottom line. But my view is if you're going to focus on community and people and treating suppliers fairly and that's really, your motive is really to make profits using those techniques, I'm okay with that. Just because I think, I think the world is hungry for something better.
Yeah. No, I mean, why are customers buying, right? So at the core of any business is, why are your customers, why are your clients buying? Why is it important? And that can be tough, right? Because you got different demographics within your customer base. I was talking about this with a client the other day, and it's like going back to the old lemonade stand, right? Is, hey, if you're just selling lemonade, why are they buying from your lemonade store as a kid compared to the little lemonade store the block over, right?
Yeah.
What's different? Did you have more ice in it? Did you have other things that they could buy? Brownies, cookies? Was it the attraction of the lemonade stand? Why are those customers buying? Or were they buying because of what you talked about, the conscious capital? Hey, I want to help these kids. Right. I might not have been thirsty, but I want to. It's a great company. It's a great organization for what it stands. So
I think in the help desk services that you're involved with, how do you answer that question about why? That I'm curious about, because that's considered a dial tone sort of service within IT. So that's a hard thing to sell sometimes. So how do you overcome some of those obstacles?
It is. So it's necessary part of business, right? So how we look at it is it's like having a cleaning service for your business, right? Could me or you go in and clean up? Yes, certainly we can do that. But the business is never going to grow if I'm doing all the cleanup work and taking out the trash. Certainly smaller businesses, you wear a couple hats, but you better get to the point where every new customer you bring on, you figure out the profitability so you can add those, so you can deliver more and service more. Again, going back to that Patagonia effect is, look at what they do. They have the science and the art down, right? They have the science in regards to really cool products that are really cool and effective. They also have the art of it is like, hey, we're able to, it's functional and it works, and it might have been recycled garbage bags, but it works for me and it's healthy. Again, probably a horrible example, but again, you can kind of understand where I'm going from. But yeah, again, at the I call it low value, high volume type of work is how are you sourcing that to get better? It's difficult because it's usually out of sight, out of mind until you start seeing, hey, there's dust on top of my table, trash wasn't taken out, what's going on here? At the end state, it comes down to your executive team because they are ultimately responsible. If there's dust on your table, then there's probably dust on others' tables. And if they're not taking that approach of going back to your team and supporting them, the little things like that, if that's getting away of just people cleaning your office, what else is getting away?
Yeah. Mike, I think that brings up a good point, and as I coach IT leaders, and I've done this in my own role as CIO, I call it the new CIO. It's collaborate, integrate, orchestrate. And at the collaboration side of things, with the advent of services in the cloud, either platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, you as an IT professional have more opportunities to leverage those capabilities. And so, to the extent that you can outsource the dial tone services, and that doesn't mean that you don't care about those services anymore, because you still have to proactively manage them. But that's the collaborate side. You look for ways to do that, and I've done that in all of my roles the last 10 years or so. And so, nothing was on-prem, everything was outsourced for the most part. And my team's IT organization spent their time on integration and pulling information. That's the new I, integration and information, getting that business value out of those applications. And then the O is orchestrate, making sure the stuff runs, which means you're not taking your eye off the ball. It means cybersecurity is in place and all the programs are in place. So it's collaborate, integrate, orchestrate. And I think, the new model is you got to find those partners. You can't go it alone. And so finding partners like the firm that you work with, I think is very essential in this marketplace. I think, if you're not outsourcing that stuff, ask yourself why. And then think about, if you really want to add value, focus on integration, focus on that orchestration, make sure that you're delivering that value and the C-suite understands that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you look at Henry Ford, right, it's kind of that horsepower, right? If he was going to do it better, he just would have just said, hey, I'm going to find faster horses, right? So he found a way. It's that assembly line. Why did we grow as the United States. You look about the automotive industry, you're able to bring in folks from overseas that have high paying jobs without having really have that education or even speak the language.
Right.
And it really grew the United States. Well, why was that? It's because Ford figured out the assembly line. He figured out what people wanted. It wasn't a faster horse. It's the Elon Musk type of mentality. It's not easy, but guess what? The people that have systems, it works, right? But you have to check those systems. At the end of the day, from talking to executives, you can see which executives are, practicing what they're preaching and not. And it's, I know it's cliche, but it's so true. At the top down, if they're not doing it, it's gonna fall away wayside. And guess what? It's not easy. It's hard. It is hard. It's anything that's worth it is hard.
Yeah, I think so. You're going to make mistakes. One of the things that I like to talk about with when you're shaping your own personal brand is you got to be resilient, because when you move down the path to new technologies and new partners, there's undoubtedly going to be issues and there are going to be challenges. But your job is to really figure out how to overcome them and still be successful anyway. So that's the resilience part. But it's a fascinating world that we live in now. And it's a lot of fun.
And one of the things for me was Slack, right? I got introduced to Slack through a client this past summer. And I was used to Teams and just internal stuff. And it was a little bit different, a little bit awkward. Once I got used to it, I really understood how people are using that as a tool. And I'm like, wow, now I know why this is kind of taken off. And some things can be trendy, but you need to learn that, because now I'm leveraging that as a tool to grow my business with the clients that I want to do business with. And I'm leveraging that with my business partners and building out my own team. Hey, this is a great tool. And the people that like that and want to do that, those are people that I probably need to be hanging out with anyways, right? If you have a hobby, those are your close friends, those are people that can do that for you, right? So you got to build that tribe, build that, posse, so to speak, of your team. But you also need some outsiders to kind of bring in new ideas.
Yeah, and those tools really, it's the people-powered platform now. And tools like, Slack really give you the ability to link people together in disparate locations. We're here to get together today, but we wouldn't have to be. You can collaborate with people all around the globe. I did a simple phone call yesterday through Skype with this gentleman from India. And it was as if he was in the next room. So it's amazing how simple things have gotten over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of, I use Zoom, and just sometimes you just can't travel. Here in Charlotte, we've grown so much, it's difficult. So I try to do video chats as much as I can, just to get that personal interaction. But also, I want my customers and my partners to know that I care. It just shows that I care and what I want to do. So to wrap this up, Joe, great first podcast.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It was awesome.